Hey, and congratulations on getting access to this video course. We're going to talk about how to turn your idea into a WordPress plugin. Now, we're not really going to talk about hiring anybody or anything like that. We're going to talk about a very crucial process that most people tend to forget about. So a lot of people tend to go from idea to trying to hire a programmer. And that's the wrong way to go about this. And the reason being is because a lot of times, if you do not write your idea and turn that into the necessary project specifications that a programmer would understand, your costs will actually be higher, or you will get a lousy programmer that will say, yes, I can do that. I can program your idea. And then months later, you find out that the programmer doesn't know what they're doing and it's just a mess. So that's the reason why this is a process where we want to take the idea and turn it into a visual flow chart. We want to develop the user interface, and we want to figure out how to communicate that properly to the right programmer. By doing this, you're going to attract the right programmer instead of the wrong programmer. All right. So first things first, this is video number 1, which is the introduction. And I want to start by talking about a goal. The goal here, like I said, is to create project specifications that any programmer will understand. Yes, this process might be a little boring, but it's going to save you a lot of money. Instead of spending thousands of dollars, you could be spending, $500 or even $1,000 in the long run. Instead of wasting time and actually this taking 4 to 5 months to create, you could save time. So this is all about how to save time and money by doing things right. Get this wrong, and like I said, you're going to pay more. You're going to attract low-skilled people that are going to say, yes, I can do anything. And you're not going to know what to do. You're going to say yes, you're going to give in, and you're going to get the wrong person. So I want to make sure that you get this right, and you're going to pay less and attract the right person for this job. So quickly, I want to talk about mindset first. I really want you to focus on how the software solves a problem. Don't focus on how much money am I going to make or how profitable is this going to be. Focus on how the software solves a problem. And yes, that's fine when you're trying to figure out what the software is going to be about. You want to make sure that it's going to be profitable, but at the same time, you want to make sure that it solves a major problem, because that's where your money is going to be. So solution comes first, money will follow later. Now, here's a quick overview of what's inside this video course. Video 1 is obviously this particular video. Video number 2 is going to be researching a profitable plugin idea. So we are going to look at profitable plugins. We're going to look at why they are profitable plugins, so you can get an idea of what your best plugin is going to be. So if you have a plugin, great, you probably could skip this process, but it might be good to watch this so that you have an idea to make sure your plugin is profitable, right? If you don't have an idea, this is a great video for you. Video number 3 is verifying your idea. We're going to make sure that it is indeed profitable. Video number 4, we're going to talk about digging deeper. We want to analyze the situation so that we make sure that we are doing our due diligence. Video number 5 is determining what the software does, which is a crucial part. This is pretty much a make it or break it, because this is the reason why somebody is going to buy your plugin. Video number 6 is list to flow. We're going to take the list that we created in the previous video, and we're going to map it out by creating a flow chart. And the reason being is because you want to see it text-wise in a list, you want to see it visually, and you want to see the user interface, which is video number 7. Video number 8 is writing your specifications. So basically the whole goal of this video course is to get to this point. And of course, last but not least, once you have your project WordPress plugin specification in hand, we move on to finding programmers in video 9. Now, I'm not really going to dive too much into this. I really want to focus on how to find the right programmer, what characteristics you should look for. I'm not really going to go to a site and show you how necessarily to hire somebody. That might be a topic for a different day, but what's crucial is what most people forget about is how do you find the right programmer? What to look for in a programmer. So that way you can create the right job post wherever you decide to go. Now let's talk about what you need to get started. Obviously, you're not going to need to have a lot of tools for this particular practice and process, but you're going to need a way to map things out, whether it be a flowchart system or a mind mapping software. We recommend Lucidchart, which is what we're going to be using. However, if you want to use a mind mapping software like Xmind or even a paper, if you are organized, that's fine. But we highly recommend Lucidchart just because it's really easy to map things out. And you'll see what I mean when I actually jump right in. And of course, you're going to need to have an open mind. A lot of people come into this thinking that they know a lot, or thinking that, oh, I've got this idea, I just want to jump straight in. No, none of that. You really have to come here with an open mind and with the thought process that, okay, profitability aside, money aside, let's focus on what problem that we are solving. Don't bring any assumptions, because assumptions are very dangerous and they actually get us in trouble because we think we have an idea of how things work. So I want you to come here with an open mind, with the assumption that everything is being start from scratch. All right, so ready? Let's go. Okay, so welcome back. This is video number 2, and we are going to talk about researching profitable plugin ideas. So don't worry about anything else except for getting an idea of what's out there and different ideas that you could potentially create. Now, obviously, if you already have a plugin in mind, you probably could skip this video, but it's a good video to watch just in case you decide to have another idea in the future. So let's do some quick research to show you what plugins are in demand by looking at what we call consumer demand. And that's really what drives whether or not your plugin is going to be profitable or not, whether or not there is a need out there. So there are two ways of doing this. Either there are many plugins out there already and you can look at them and look what's wrong with them and see what people are saying and improve on that, which is actually the easiest way to go about doing this and can be very profitable. Or you can develop your brand new idea, plugin doesn't exist or anything like that. But with that, it's a little bit more time to try to figure out consumer demand, but there are ways of going about doing that. So consumer demand is really important here. So I really want to drive that home. All great WordPress plugins are born out of problems that people are facing. So if this is a problem that you're facing, that's great. Then you can associate with that. You know exactly how that feels. If this is a problem that you do not face, but you can research it and figure out how people are feeling about it, what people are doing about it to solve that issue, and how your WordPress plugin can speed the process up, then that's a good thing as well. But you really want to get into the brain of the consumer. So let me go ahead and show you how to find consumer demand through the use of free keyword tools and how to start with Google and research from that point on. Now, before I jump in and start talking about consumer demand or anything like that, I want to talk briefly about what you should be looking for as you're looking for the consumer demand. Now, obviously, when it comes to any type of software or WordPress plugin, what you're trying to look for is you're trying to find some sort of tedious process that takes time, and it's a very manual process. So what I mean by that is something that somebody actually does either on their computer or wherever else, and it's just taking a lot of time, and you have to speed that process up, and they're willing to pay for the ability to speed that process up. All right, so if you look at most WordPress plugins, they basically speed a process up, or they help you in some sort of way. They basically take some process that could take anywhere from a couple hours to a couple days, or even a couple weeks, and it speeds the whole process up, thereby saving you time. That's one of the reasons why most people buy pieces of software, because it automates the process. So as you're looking through for consumer demand, or as you're looking for plugins, you want to find something that is sort of a pain point, meaning it's really frustrating because you have to take all this time to actually do it. All right, so if we head back over to Google here, and if we think about it for just a second, if we think that softwares often are born from frustrations. So you can go to Google and type something like top frustrations and let Google complete it for you, such as top frustrations in life, top frustrations at work, top frustrations in gaming. So you could think about something you enjoy yourself, or something that you have done that takes time on the computer and you want to speed the process up. All right. But usually this process with a WordPress plugin needs to be something that is on your website. So top frustrations related to maybe your website, and then go from there and try to figure out what these top frustrations are. So if you just take some time to just go through the articles, so let's open up these here, and you may or may not find the WordPress plugin that you're looking for, but you're kind of getting an idea of what is happening on the website itself. So we can see like playing Messenger, lacking communication, changes, continuous edits. So maybe you could develop a WordPress plugin around that. Wavering deadlines, time management. You can develop a WordPress time management plugin. You can go through here. We can go to a different article here. So this is Quora, and we see this guy says providing high quality fresh content. Maybe you could develop a plugin that pulls in YouTube videos or content curation to make it so it's easy for people to develop content. Or maybe you can develop something that allows them to create fresh articles really fast without plagiarizing, of course. And then we go down and let's look at a different article. What are your top 3 frustrations with your website? Too much content that overwhelm the reader, user design and user experience, directing the user to the right content and workflow. So going through here, what you're looking for is a pattern. If you can see several people saying, I have problems because just finding fresh content is just a big roadblock in my life. If you see tons of people saying that, the next thing you want to do is you want to head on over to wordpress.org/plugins over here, and then you want to type that in. So we could type in something like time management and see what we get. So as we can see, a good amount of plugins, and we can see, if we can see more plugins, that means there is definitely a demand. Now, if you see a lot of plugins, but there's no feedback or ratings or anything like that, that might not be a good sign. But another thing you can do is you can see a lot of times you'll have like a really good plugin, but nobody leaves any reviews, right? So we got 4.5 stars out of 5, 22 reviews. But if you look down on the bottom left-hand corner of these boxes, you can see that 40,000 people installed it. All right, so that definitely shows there is a demand for that plugin. So if we look over here, easy appointments, 3,000 installs, 100,000 installs for events manager. So we can see the demand by looking at wordpress.org wptuts/plugins. But Jetpack here is obviously created by WordPress, so obviously they have 3 million active installs. So that means that 3 million people installed it on their WordPress site. So what you want to do is you want to go through here and find a WordPress plugin that really stands out to you. So let's say we want to click on this one here, and you want to get an idea of what it does. And then you want to take a look at the 1-star ratings. Why 1-star ratings? Because you want to find people's frustrations. You want to see if you can find a pattern. Now, if this WordPress plugin is really good and you're asking, how can I compete with these guys? Well, you can look at the 1-star ratings and see where this plugin falls short. If constantly people are saying this falls short because of this, and this, you can go out and create a WordPress plugin based on that particular shortcoming. And then you come out with it, and you know that it's going to sell because you have so many people that are frustrated. Now, obviously, you need to make sure that people are willing to buy for that, and we'll talk more about that later. But that's just a simple process that you can take by going to Google, typing in top frustrations website, or things I hate about my website, or something related to WordPress, and then find those and dig deep into those pain points. You can do the same thing with YouTube. You can do the same thing with Facebook. Use the search bar at the top and find frustrations that people have. So that's a good way to kind of figure out consumer demand in the terms of figuring out how many people are frustrated with the specific problem. And that's really what we're trying to drive home. All right, so let's move on to the next video. Okay, so welcome back. This is video number 3, and we're going to talk about how to verify your idea. So in video number 2, we talked about finding consumer demand, finding the frustration and the pain points, and then figuring out what the problem was. Now let's verify to make sure that it is profitable. So we want to take that research and start spying on software developers that are already doing well. You already saw a glimpse of the active installs and how to figure that out, but we're going to take it one step further. And I want to tell you that not all plugins succeed, and it's easy to want to jump in and just start selling. There are many marketplaces out there that allow you to sell your WordPress plugins. And let's take a look at some of those places and verify your idea. Okay, so what you want to do is head on over to the browser here, and you can go to Google, you can type in WordPress plugin marketplace, but what you're primarily looking for are marketplaces that sell WordPress plugins and people are actually buying them. That's what you're looking for. You're not looking for marketplaces that are giving away free WordPress plugins. You're wanting to make sure that people are willing to pay money for it. Now, you can go through here, decide what you want to go to, that's fine. But in particular, I typically use a site called Envato Market. And in this case, the site is located at codecannon.net. That's codecannon.net. And if you go over here, you're going to be able to go under WordPress and you can see all of the WordPress plugins. So they have everything categorized. You can have add-ons, advertising, auctions, calendars, e-commerce forums, galleries, media, membership sites, newsletters, SEO, and so much more. All right. So you can go through here. You can pick a category if you want. Let's say SEO, or you can simply enter the keyword up here. So if we chose SEO, we can see that there are 65 WordPress SEO plugins. Now, how do we know if it's going to sell or not? All right, so one good indication is with CodeCannon at least, and this might be different with other marketplaces, but you can actually see the amount of sales that they are making. So you can see, for example, this plugin only has 3 sales and is $18. This one's $12, has 4 sales. This one has 29 sales. Now you can filter things out and find ones that are getting the highest ratings, for example, 4 stars and above. So we can see that here. And we can look at the ones that are the top sellers. So we can see this one has about 6,400 sales. This one has 3,700 sales. We can see this one is a kind of a content curator. So this one creates articles. So remember, we looked at the frustration that a lot of people had was, number one, creating content. So we can see that this is definitely matches that research. So we can see that people are willing to pay money for an article rewriter. And this also has really good star ratings, which is a good indication. Now, if we take a look at it, like we said earlier, we can look at the comments, look at the reviews, look at the negative reviews, and get an idea of what people are saying that they're frustrated with in terms of this plugin. And you could go along and make it better. So that's one way of doing it. But I'm just verifying that indeed what we looked at earlier was profitable. All right, so that's a good indication that people are actually buying. All right, so next thing, we could type in time management, which is something that we had searched for previously. Now, when I type this in, if you look to the left, you'll see that it's looking for time management, but also WordPress SEO. So I don't need the WordPress SEO, but I am still looking for top sellers, 4 stars and more, and newest items. So maybe not newest items. I'm just looking for a good indication that something is selling. So time management, we see 9 here that fit that criteria. We can see there's a booking system. For appointment booking, we see there is a freelance, looks like a CRM, content relationship management tool. We can see there's timetable for responsive scheduling. Let's look down here. So as far as time management, it looks like it's just these two here, the booking system and this one here. And we can see that definitely there's a big demand. There's 6,000 sales for that, and there's 4,000 sales with here. So just go here and type the keyword in here and go through the same process that I went through to figure out, is my idea selling? If your idea is not selling, that doesn't mean that it's not going to sell. It just means that it's going to take a longer period of time to have to educate people about the plugin. All right. So now the worst thing that you can do is to go into a market, develop an idea that there's no demand for the market. And if it's a good idea and you really feel like this is something, I've done the consumer demand, it shows there, but nobody's selling this WordPress plugin, then you might be the first person who's actually selling this plugin. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that nobody has paved the way, and you're going to have to pave the way. So you're going to have to educate the market, which can take years. So realistically, it can take several years before you actually start making income, because you're spending all that time trying to educate the market, if that makes sense. But if you find something that is already profitable and build upon the frustrations that people have, these people have already paved the way for you, and having competition is actually a good sign, because people are already educated and they are buying. So with that said, let's move on to the next video. All right, so welcome back. This is video number 4, dig deeper. So once you have solidified your idea, let's dig deeper. And what I mean by that is trying to actually analyze, break it down, start writing things down, and start brainstorming, because we've already done the research process. But this is usually when people go out and hire a programmer and they say, hey, I really like this plugin, and they approach a programmer and say, can you clone this plugin? Now, I caution you and I say, don't do this. That's a big mistake. And this is something that a lot of us do. I did it at one time. I've had seen a lot of people do this before, and it just creates a lot of heartache, lots of loss of money, and loss of time, because what you end up doing is you hand this idea to somebody else who has a different idea. So it's kind of like the telephone game where somebody tells you something and then you tell somebody something and then somebody else tells something. So their idea of what you just said has nothing to do with what you're thinking. So you want to make sure that you have a clear-cut project specification that says this is exactly what I want, and then they go and program it. All right. So that's the reason why I'm putting you through this process. So like I said, I repeat, never ask a programmer to clone another plugin. Make sure that you have dug deeper and figured out what exactly your plugin does. And it's okay. You want to figure out what the plugin should do, what your competitors aren't doing, and then making it better. So we talked briefly about this in the previous videos, but I really want to drive it home and I really want you to put it on paper. So that's why I am repeating a few things. So the goal in this video is to merely figure out what the major problem is. List out the problem, list out the solutions that are there for the problem and that solve the problem. Is there a manual process that can be automated? Is there a tedious process within this problem? Because that's a good indication on whether or not this is going to be a successful WordPress plugin or not. Successful meaning whether it can be developed or not. And I'll actually show you an example. I'll break it down so that you can actually see what that looks like. We're not just going to talk theory and concepts here and fundamentals. We're actually going to take an idea, I'm going to list out the problem, and so that you can see the exact process and that you should be able to follow along. Now, another thing is there a process? And if there is, this is great because then you know you can automate or speed up the process by using a WordPress plugin. So let's dig deeper and let's look at an example. Okay, so homework time. What you need to do is you need to pull out a WordPad or your favorite word processor and then simply type these out. So number one, list out the problem. Number two, what is the manual process? Number three, how annoying is this process? And number four, what does this process make you lose? Number five, what does this process make you want to do right now? Does it want to make you pull out your hair? Number six, list out possible solutions. So possible meaning different solutions. List out how these solutions would make you better. For number seven, make you happier and make you gain something. So what I'm pushing you through is you're going through what the consumer is thinking. All right. So list out the problems. Let's think about some problems that we actually looked at. If you remember in the previous videos, we found that a lot of people were frustrated with creating fresh content. So creating fresh content on an ongoing basis. So that was one of the major frustrations in relation to the frustrations with the website, remember? Now, what is the manual process? Well, there are many different ways of going about this. So manual process is obviously creating content from scratch. Now, what goes into that content creating from scratch? And I want you to list out everything that you can think of. So in this case, the manual process is finding maybe keywords that people are looking for. So maybe finding topics. So that would go under finding topics. And then when you're finding topics, finding keywords that people are looking for, and then finding or writing articles. And before that, okay, so finding topics, let's see here, finding keywords that people are looking for, how to write the article maybe, And not just finding keywords, but maybe finding key points within that specific content piece. How to write the article, writing it well, grammar. It's just, and as we can see, it's very time consuming. Finding topics, and not just finding topics, but finding topics that are hot or in demand. Now, as we go through this process, what are you noticing right now? I'm noticing that a lot of it is actually the process of finding topics, finding keywords, finding key points. That process seems to be the most tedious process. So by doing this allows you to see where the frustration point is. So it's not necessarily writing the article. Writing the article might be easier because you can always outsource that and you can find somebody to write the article. But finding the topics, finding the keywords, finding the key points, making sure that article is actually interesting, that seems to be the hardest part. So what if we created a plugin that would go out and find content that is hot, demand, and all that? All right, so let's move through here. How annoying is this process? Very time consuming. If you think about just through that one process, doing all that research and all that can take hours. So what does this process make you lose? I lose hours that could be spent on other things. And that's just one article. Very time consuming. Take hours. What does this process make you want to go do right now? It's very frustrating, I can see, because creating, if I have to do this on and on and on, it's a very, very tedious process. So I think in my brain, if I had a plugin that would allow me to find content, maybe not necessarily the topics and all that, but maybe find hot topics, but maybe help me find hot content. And let's see, what does this process make you want to do right now? So makes me want to scream or walk away from the computer and go do something else. All right, so obviously different people, it's going to be different, but you're thinking about your prospect too. It probably makes them want to scream. It probably makes them want to walk away and go do something else, and that's not productive. So what are kind of possible solutions that we can take? So possible solutions are that they have a WordPress plugin that creates or finds hot topics, keywords, key points. And the question is, how are we going to create the content? Well, there are several different ways in creating content. You can either do content curation, which basically means getting topics and actual content from somebody else and posting it on your site and maybe responding to that content. So that's content curation. Or you can create content from scratch. Now, like we saw earlier, the tedious process seems to be this right here, because you can always hire somebody to create the content as long as you have this information. Or you can have a system that will find hot topics and hot keywords and key points and all that and curate the content. Now, we need to figure out, what do we want to do? And you have to be very, very specific as much as possible. Remember, the plugin that we saw earlier was a plugin at Envato codecanon.net. It was a plugin that basically allowed you to create articles. So create content from scratch. So you could do that. or you could just do content curation. Now, if you create content from scratch, obviously that's going to be very, very tedious. I'm going to tell you right now that unless you're a very highly technical person, and if you're a newbie especially, or intermediate, this is going to be very hard to do. So what you might want to do is you might even want to go further and go on freelancing sites and pay somebody to consult with. So pay a programmer to consult with to try to figure out how hard potentially would it be to do this or do this. So let's do content curation. And I think content curation is super hot. That's what a lot of people are doing. And not just everyone is doing it, but it works. People on Facebook pages, you see every day, most Facebook fan pages, what they're doing is content curation. They're pulling in memes, pictures, or even blogs or sites that are not theirs, but they're sharing it. That's content curation. So let's maybe develop a WordPress plugin that finds hot topics, keywords, key points, and content curation. So finds, in this case, finds hot content that is curated from other people's sites. All right. So list out how these solutions would make your life better. If you had a WordPress plugin that would allow you to go out, find hot content, not just any content, but hot content that is curated from other people's sites. How would make you feel? I would save lots of hours of time, make me happier, gain confidence to focus on my WordPress blog or site. Okay, so essentially what you've just done right now is you figured out what the pain points are. So you can use this later on to create the marketing material for your product. But while doing so, we figured out creating fresh content is on an ongoing basis is the major problem. And then the possible solution is this one here. So this is actually what you really want. So we're going to bold that right here. And I'm going to copy this down here. So the problem and the solution, that's all we want. So the problem's here. And the solution's here. So creating the fresh content on an ongoing basis, our solution is to find hot content that is curated from other people's sites. So in the next video, when we dig even further and we actually create a list, we want to break this down. All right. So that said, let's move on to the next video. Okay, so welcome to video number 5. Let's determine what the software does. So once you figured out what the big problem is going to solve, it's time to figure out how it will do it in more detail. So in the previous video, we figured out what the solution was, basically how frustrated your consumer would be with the problem and how happy they would be with the problem solved. So now we need to dig deeper further and create what we call a to-do list. And if you've created grocery lists, to-do lists, then creating software specifications is actually very, very similar. And it's actually a very easy thing to do once you have figured out what kind of problem it'll solve and how it will go about doing that. And that's what we're going to do in this particular video. Now, the way to create software is to create a sequential and logical flow. So it's not going to be just a randomized grocery list. It's going to be a sequential logical flow. So whatever you do in the beginning is going to impact the end. And it'll make more sense in just a second. So in other words, if, let's say for example, if a user clicks a button, you're gonna write down what happens. If the user takes a specific action, then what happens? If the user does not take that action, then what happens? So you're really gonna have to figure out basically all the steps of the process, and then what happens if this happened, then this happened. If this does not happen, then this does not happen. Or if this does not happen, what happens? So it's kind of like the if and else statements. It's a logical, if this happens, then that happens. So it's kind of like a cause and effect, essentially. If I drop this ball, then the ball bounces, right? If I throw the ball at the wall, then the ball either bounces to the left or the right. But in this case, you're gonna know exactly where the ball falls if you're gonna be able to develop the software correct. So let me actually look deeper. Let's take an example, and I'm gonna show you how this is all gonna work so it makes sense to you. Okay, so back to where we left off in the previous video. What we're gonna do now is we are going to break down the list of possible solutions. So we already figured out that the problem was creating fresh content on an ongoing basis. Now what we're gonna do is we are going to take the list of possible solutions right here, which is finds hot content that is curated from other people's sites and maybe places it on the WordPress post or the page. So let's write that down. So finds hot content that is curated. Let's say, break it down here. So basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to figure out the process. Whether you go out on YouTube and you watch a video and you figure out the step-by-step process, what happens behind the scenes, what it does, what the user does to have to interact with the software for it to do such a thing. And you know, you're not going to get everything perfect, but if you find a good programmer, they're going to be able to fill it between the gaps. You're going to be able to figure out what they need to do. What we're trying to do is we're trying to do as much legwork as possible to make it easy for the programmer. All right, so first we need to have a tool and a WordPress plugin where maybe somebody enters a topic or a keyword. So let's say user enters something like I'll put brackets around it, topics, keywords, something. And then the plugin needs to do something next. So obviously, you know, if you go to Google, for example, and let me break it down. If we go to Google, the user obviously goes to Google. Now, the user essentially can be the plugin. So the plugin goes to Google, then it takes the keyword and the topic, and then it enters it into Google, for example. So let's say we're looking for some hot topics such as kidney stone solutions. All right, so let's just put that here, and so we have that here. So the machine comes here, they look through, and they try to find hot content. Now the question that we need to figure out is what is considered hot topic or hot content. It may not necessarily be something that is ranked up here, right? So how do we know if it is hot content or not? Well, one way to figuring out, especially within Google, is when you type in something like kidney stone treatment. You see how Google suggests certain topics and all that? So we know these are hot topics because Google suggests these. In order for these to actually get in here, this basically means that tons and tons of people are typing these in. All right, so maybe we can have a WordPress plugin that goes to Google, we type that keyword in, and it tries to fill in the rest. So maybe it grabs the Google suggests keywords right here, and then from that it gives you a list of keywords. All right, so in this case we can say kidney stone, And then if somebody types that in, it grabs these in here. So let me write that down here. Okay, so user enters topics and keywords. Let's say user goes to Google. And I'm gonna rewrite this in a minute, but let's just make it simple. User goes to Google, user enters topics and keywords. Google gives a list of suggested keywords, suggestions. And the normal process is that the user copies the top 10 suggested keywords. So what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to break it down to what the user does. Don't worry about what the plugin does yet. We're gonna do all that in just a minute. So user goes to Google, they type in the keyword, then Google gives a list of keywords. So you're telling us what the machine does and the user does. User copies the top 10 keywords, and then maybe the user goes to, let's say, Facebook or some blog site, maybe Blogger, or let's say, we'll just call this user goes to popular blog directory. User then types in the top 10 suggested keywords, and then user finds hot content. And normally the user would link hot content to the blog. And that's basically the process of finding hot content. So that's the process right here. It's a step-by-step process. See, it's kind of like a grocery list, but it's kind of not in a certain way. It's a sequential, logical, step-by-step process. So if you think about something easier, like baking a cake. So if you look at a recipe, you see that the recipe tells you step by step what you need to do. So you need to gather the items, typically you need to preheat the oven, and then you need to mix in the dry materials before you mix in the eggs and all of that. So there's actually a process to all of this, right? And that's what you're really trying to figure out, is the whole process. Don't worry about the if and else statements yet. Let's just get this done. Okay, so the next thing I normally do is I take this information here, and I'm gonna leave that up at the top, but I'm gonna make a brand new copy and paste here. So you see everything from here to here. And we'll call this WordPress plugin versus the user. So now what we're trying to do is we're trying to write what the process is, and then we're trying to translate that into how the WordPress plugin acts and how the user acts. Okay, so starting from the beginning again. User goes to Google. Now in this case, the user is going to have to stay inside of the WordPress plugin. They're not going to be able to leave or anything like that. We're going to want them to be able to click a button and it all happens. All right. So user goes to WordPress plugin after they have activated it. And then the user enters maybe a keyword. All right. Now, obviously, they're still going to have to go to Google, right? But the user's not going to go to Google or any outside sites. That's the WordPress plugin's job, right? So the WordPress plugin, we're just going to call it plugin. Plugin goes to Google and then enters that keyword that the user just typed in. Now, Google gives a list of those suggested keywords, and then the plugin copies those top 10 suggested keywords. Then the plugin goes to the popular blog directory, whatever that we specify later. You could even tell the programmer, hey, I want these lists of, links or directories. And then the user types in the top 10 suggested keywords. Now, in this case, the plugin is doing everything. Typically what happens is the user just enters a keyword, and then the plugin does the rest. So the plugin types in the top 10 suggested keywords. Plugin shows the maybe shows a list of the hot content. User sees the list and chooses. Then the plugin copies a link of the hot content to the WordPress blog. So this takes somewhat of a practice, but that's why I'm showing you the step-by-step process. So first things first, you go through here, you list it out, then you reorganize it. And then if you notice, what I'm trying to do is I'm just showing what the user sees. So the user goes to the WordPress plugin, they enter a keyword, but then when it times to go outside, the plugin goes and does the rest, and then it pretty much finds the content for us. So really what the user only sees in this case is they're seeing the WordPress plugin, they enter the keyword, they click enter, and then as they're waiting, the plugin shows the hot content and they immediately see the hot content, because a human ultimately is going to have to decide what content is best for them. Now you could make it automated if you want, and you say plugin sees a list of content and then chooses it based on certain criteria, and then it spits it out. It's all automatic. You can do that. But at the end of the day, you have to pick and choose what is the user going to do as a human, and then what does the plugin do as a machine, and how smart should that machine be. So pretty much that's it. Now we could go further and we could do if and else statements. So we can go back here and say if the user goes, well, obviously the user is going to go to the plugin. So if we go down here, it says user enters keyword. We can say if the user enters a keyword, do this. Now obviously if the user does not enter a keyword, nothing happens. So we don't need that. But if there was a different path or a different option, we could do that as well. So if a user enters a keyword, then we take them on a progression. And I'll show you more about that in the visual map later. But we can say if that happens, then the plugin does this, then this, then this, then this, then this, and then this. Then if user sees a list and chooses, then this. Now obviously if user does nothing, then nothing happens. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Most of the time that's the case. So we're pretty much done now. That's all we need to do. And if this seems a little complicated, I'm just going to say and put it out there that this does take time. You need to get a hang of it. You could even go about going out and just writing things that you normally do day to day, like brushing your teeth and all of that, and try to get a hang of it first before you actually move forward with this process. It does take time because I am trying to teach you from a programmer to a newbie, so it does take time. So don't worry if you don't get it right the first time, but I'm going to show you how to turn this into a map in the next video. Okay, so welcome to video number 6. We're going to talk about list to flow. Once you've created your step-by-step sequential and logical to-do list, you're going to need to turn it into a visual flow chart that makes sense, because this is what's going to help you and the programmer understand how all the missing pieces or pieces of the puzzle flow together. So let's hop on over to Lucidchart and build out your visual map, which is crucial to understanding how it all works. All right, so let me go ahead and show you how. Okay, so we're going to take the list that we created earlier, which was the if then else type statement. As you can see, this one's actually fairly easy because it's pretty self-explanatory. It's very straightforward. Depending on how complex your software is going to be, it's going to vary. So I'm not going to be able to say if it's super complex or whatever, it's going to take you time. I'm not going to be able to tell you how long it's going to take, but ultimately, if you want to sell software, this is all part of the process. Now we're using Lucidchart, as I told you earlier, and very easy to use. What we're trying to do is we're trying to turn what we see here into a visual flow chart. It's going to be able to make more sense when you actually see it visually. All right, so let's just enter this. So WordPress plugin, let's kind of name it first. It's going to be WordPress plugin : hot content finder. And of course, I probably could create a better name for that, but we're just gonna go with it. So I'm gonna type that in here. And I pulled in a text icon. What's nice about Lucidchart is you can pull these items over and you can create basically a flowchart. So I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so that you can see it, not too big like that. And we're gonna put that here. And the next thing we want to do is the user goes to the WordPress plugin. All right, so let's just copy a box over here and type that in. So user goes to WordPress plugin. Or what we could do is we could make a user. We could, let's see, I don't know if there's any icons for people in here, but let's see. I'll just make this user, all caps, like that. So what's nice about this is everything is organized. Everything looks nice, and that's what you're trying to do. So WordPress plugin. So user comes here, and what do they see next? They see maybe the settings or something, like some sort of settings or search form. All right, so user goes to plugin, they enter a keyword. Okay, so the next thing is on the search form, they can enter keyword. Now, before we do this, what does the person see? All right, so do they see maybe a list of their campaigns first? So you want to take a look at other plugins and get an idea. So we could have plugins and we can have campaigns. So maybe they see a list of campaigns first. So we'll type in list of campaigns. And I'm going to try to make this a little bit bigger so that you can see it like that. There we go. So user, we'll make the user kind of a pink. So that's nice. You can also change the box colors. You can also change the colors of the text as well and the font as well. You can also drag and drop images into this as well. So there's a lot of things you can do, but just keep it simple. All right, so they see a list of campaigns. And then maybe they have the ability to create new campaigns. So create new campaigns. So what you're doing, as you can see here, it's not exact with this. It's sort of even more. So they have the ability to see a list of campaigns that they can go and edit the campaign, or they can create a brand new campaign. If they create a brand new campaign, then what next? Well, next, maybe they create or find hot content. So within that one campaign, they can find hot content. Now, what else do they see within the campaign? Well, maybe besides that, they can create the name of the campaign. So create, so they name the campaign. All right, so maybe that's what they see first, and then they find hot content. But what do they need to do to find hot content? Well, if we refer back to here, it says if user enters a keyword. So name the campaign, find the hot content, which consists of enter a keyword. All right, so move it here. And then what's next here is then the plugin goes to Google, enters a keyword. So this is all the user needs to do. So maybe what I need to do is I need to color code it. So since the user is kind of a pinkish, maybe I'll make it a green, light green. What I'm gonna do is anytime the user does something or sees something, it's gonna be green. If the WordPress plugin does something, let's say we're gonna make it like a light blue. All right, so the user sees a list of campaigns. That's part of the plugin itself. So I'm gonna make this blue, create new campaigns, find hot content. All right, so all of this is blue because this is part of the plugin. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to color code it. So green means user, blue means WordPress plugin, and we'll call this user interface. And then of course we have the third thing, which is what the user or what the WordPress plugin does. So WordPress plugin action. And we're going to make this maybe a purple, a light purple. All right. So that way, every time we see green, it's something that the user does. Every time we see blue, it's what we see as the user interface in the WordPress plugin. And then if the WordPress plugin has to go to Google or anything like that, it's an action. So we see that as purple. All right. So this is our color coded so that we can read it better. So we'll put this here. All right. So enter keyword. That's definitely a green. So that's the user. And as you're going through the process, this process might be somewhat boring, but hey, you know what? This is going to make your life a lot easier when you actually develop the software. All right, so enter a keyword, then what? All right, so then the plugin goes to Google. So remember, this is the action for the plugin. So I'm going to copy that. So what I'm doing is I'm copying this and then I'm pasting it. But I'm using my shortcut keys, so I'm using Control-C and Control-V, like that. So now what I need to do is drag this down here. We don't need this. We're gonna put this here. And then next we have the plugin goes to Google and enters a keyword. So goes to Google and enters user keyword. All right, so we're gonna link that there. Then what? Well, then Google gives a list of suggested keywords. So obviously that's not the action of anything. So I'm going to, we'll make this white and say Google shows a list of suggested keywords. So that's what happens next. So I'm going to make we're just basically connecting the dots. So I'm connecting it from here to here. That's why you see the arrow going forward. Once it gives a list of the suggested keywords, then the plugin copies the top 10 suggested keywords. So going back here, we're going to copy this, paste that. I'm going to drag it over here. And drag it here. So, and then grabs top 10 hot let's see. Okay, so the plugin grabs the top 10 suggested keywords. Okay, that's what we want. Keywords. Okay, so next, we're almost done. So then the plugin goes to the popular blog directory. So we copy that over here, align it so everything's good. Connect this little dot over to here. And then the plugin goes to X blog directory. You could tell the programmer I want a list that I constantly update of the hottest blog directories, or you could have it just go to one. But that can be elaborated further later on. So it goes to X blog directory and enters the top 10, I'll just call it SK, suggested keywords. All right. So from there, what next? So types it in, and then the plugin shows the hot content. So usually at this point, though, of course, in detail, we have blog shows hot content. So at this point, the WordPress plugin is going to grab the hot content and display it to the user. Now, of course, this is where the user comes in, right? So the user sees the list and chooses. So next, I'm gonna put it here. User sees lists of hot content and picks. Next, once after they pick, then what? Okay, we go back here. Then the plugin copies a link of the hot content that the user chooses to the WordPress blog. So copies or adds a link to WordPress post or page. Then you could get all elaborate and you could say, hey, after that, you know, the system will allow the user to enter information with their thoughts and all of that on the content so that it is properly content curated. So that's it. That's pretty much all you have to do. And this is what I would do. And at this point, you have this in hand. You have this in hand so the programmer can literally see what's happening all throughout. And then after that, what we need to do is we need to, of course, build out the user interface. So we kind of got a glimpse here. So if we go back here, we can see the user interface right here, right? So we've already done a lot of the legwork. All we have to do is use a graphic program to kind of design what each of these look like. All right. So with that said, I'll see you in the next video. Hello and welcome to video number 7, and we're going to talk about user interface design. So once you have a visual flow chart or map of what your software will do, it's time to work on the user interface, which is what the user is going to see. So the flow chart really was for you to understand and for the programmer to understand, but the user interface is also for the programmer, and so that you have an idea of how things are going to be laid out and all of that. So creating this along with a flow chart will allow you to connect the visual dots, thus creating better specifications for the programmer to understand. So to do this, you're going to need to have an image editor or other tools. So with that said, let me go ahead and show you how. Okay, so this is kind of going to be the fun part because you get to actually create the user interface, which is what the user is going to see. So if we go back to Lucidchart over here, we saw that we color coded everything just to make it easier. If you think about it, if we didn't color code it, it would be hard to figure out what is happening. So we can see that the user comes in, they obviously see the WordPress plugin, and what we need to figure out is what they're going to see. All right. So obviously the programmer, if they have CSS and a little bit of design, and if they've developed WordPress plugins in the past, they are pretty much going to be able to figure this out. But you do want to give them some guidelines, but you don't want to say, hey, you have to do this, but you want to give them some structure so that they have an idea of what you're looking for. Because otherwise what happens a lot of times is, even with website development or any project development, is a lot of times people say, I want this, but they're thinking this, but then the programmer is thinking something totally different. So you want to make sure that you are able to make sure that they're on the same page. All right. So we come back here, and this is what the user sees, the WordPress plugin. They see a list of campaigns. They have the ability to create new campaigns, and they name the campaign. They find the hot content. So if I go through here, it's pretty easy. In fact, most programmers should be able to figure this part out, this, and this. Now, we just want to make it, like I said, just to make sure that we're 100% on the same page. So what do we want people to see when they first see the WordPress plugin? Maybe they see the list of campaigns, and maybe they see the ability to create new campaigns. So let's write that down. So I want you to open up Paint or whatever you want to use. Let's just use Paint because that's the bare bone minimum. If I can use Paint, you should be able to use Paint or something else. All right, so usually when you come to a site, let's see here, I haven't used Paint in a while, but you normally, let's use this here. Let's see what happens. Okay. So normally you enter a box like this, and then of course you see the left-hand side with a WordPress plugin as the menu bar, and normally you see like the plugin, information here. And then of course you see like, the top bar, and then of course the main part is right here. So maybe we'll make this red, and yeah, we'll just keep it black. All right, so within here itself, we have the options here. So maybe the menu bar here, we could say menu bar. So I'm going to make an arrow here, and the menu bar, they should have the ability to see a list campaigns, create new campaign, and don't worry if you can't figure it out, or you're like, okay, how's this whole process going to work? Do I need to create a short code? Do I need to do this? Don't worry about it. I would allow the programmer to do that, but you're just trying to get an idea for yourself what you're expecting. But over here we can see list campaigns. Maybe they see the name of plugin, and then inside here we have, let's say they click here, let's see here, let's say the welcome screen, you have a welcome screen. So welcome screen, and depends on you what you want to put on the welcome screen, that's fine. But let's say that they have the option to choose the list campaigns, create new campaign over here. So that's going to be a totally different screen. Next, so let's see. Next, I'm going to open up a new window. So that's going to be screen 1, the welcome screen. All right. So now we're going to be focusing in on that little box. So I'm going to open up a brand new window, and we're going to put a box here. This is what they're going to see. Now, if they click on create new campaign, or let's say this, they're going to click on list campaigns. So I'm going to type list campaigns. And let's see, we're not going to focus on the menu bar. We're just going to focus on the main box kind of thing. So let's go back over here. List campaigns. So what do they see? Maybe they see statistics. Maybe they see a list of campaigns. What do they see? So we're going to say, all right, we'll do that. You know what? I'm just going to make a menu bar so it's just easier. Here they see campaign 1, campaign 2, campaign 3, campaign 4, and they should have the ability to edit each campaign. So that should be that, and then let's type in paint again. Now all these are easy, but when it comes to actually implementing the other parts, let's see, so that's easy. List campaigns, create new campaign, and so we have create new campaign. Let's do create new campaign. So you might be thinking, why am I doing this? Well, I just told you the reason, but it'll make life easier, a lot easier for you later on. So all right, so create campaigns. This part's going to be a little bit more elaborate. Create campaign. So maybe there's a box for, let's see, campaign name. Let's see what else here. We don't need that for now. Move back here. Okay, so name campaign, then find hot content, but then they need to enter the keyword to do that. So name campaign and then maybe keyword. Enter keyword. So maybe we have a box like a form field here, and then maybe there's a form field here for the keyword. All right, so we enter the keyword here. They enter the enter button. So let's see. Maybe there's an enter button. So we'll just make the star as like the enter button or something. They click the star and then it produces the content. So from here, maybe there's a progress bar. And the progress bar is here. It moves around like, oops, like that. Make it blue like that. So as we're waiting, the progress bar is there because it does take time to go out and scrape content. So maybe the progress bar is good, so it just makes the user think that it's actually collecting data. So you do that, and then after that, we go back over here. Then it goes to Google, enters the keyword. So now this is what the user sees, right? This is all the background. So user doesn't even see what's going on here. All right. So because we know it's green and blue, we can skip all the way to the green. So next, the user sees a list of hot topics and picks. So maybe after that, we could say, here's the list right here. So maybe if they see a list here, a large list, and they can choose or they can select which ones they want. So maybe there's like a radio or checkout checkbox or something where they can select the hot topic that they want. They select it, And then of course the next screen would be, it actually copies the content to the WordPress block. So how does that look like? Well, maybe it automatically does that. I don't know. But that's really between you and the programmer, but the programmer should be able to figure all that out. So that's not something that you really have to worry about. So what I would do next is I would just, copy this and save these to your computer, and you're pretty much good to go. Now, I'm not going to close all these out because we're going to need this in the future video when we put together the final specifications and the final contract. And we'll see you there. Hello and welcome to video number 8. This is writing your specifications. So congratulations, by now you have in hand the most important part of the software creation process. Now all we have to do is take everything that we have put together and make it look like it's something that it's an official document that you can hand over to your programmer. Now this is a very, very important part, because if you get this part wrong, your programmer will charge you more money to decipher what you want. So what we talked about in the previous video about the telephone game, where if you tell somebody, they tell somebody, and they tell somebody. Even if it's 3 people, by the time it gets to the third person, it's totally different. So that's why you want to make sure that you have something in a written document, which essentially is your contract. And your contract between you and the programmer, because if your programmer turns around and says, no, that's going to cost more money, or I can't do that because this is not what we talked about, this is going to cost more money, cost more time, you're just going to have to go along with it if you don't have a written contract. So this is your contract, and I'm going to show you how to finalize the document. Okay, so what I need to do is simply grab all the images. So I need to grab this right here, which is the flow chart. I need to grab all 3 of these user interface designs that I created. And of course, I need to grab this here. Now, as far as the pictures go, what I like to use is I like to use a program called Snagit. There are many different programs out there. Basically, what you want to do is you want to grab this image and put it into a document. And in this case, we're going to be using Word. Now, if you're using a Mac computer, you can simply click, I believe it's like Shift something 4, and then you can grab the image. But if you're using a PC like me, you're going to need to have a program that actually grabs the screens. So I went ahead and did this for this one, and this one. And with Lucidchart, what's nice about it is you can save it and publish it as a PNG, a PDF file, whatever you want to. But I went ahead and did that for this. And as you can see here, this is the flowchart here. We have the screenshots for the welcome screen, the list campaign screen, and of course, let's see, we didn't have this one here. So I'll need to go ahead and do that right here. So we grab that there. So we grab that, and there we go. So this is right here. So we're good to go right there. And then of course we have the actual information. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to go to Word, and let's just go ahead and copy and paste that in here. Now I want everything to be uniform and look nice, so I'm going to maybe size it down. WordPress plugin hot content finder, specifications. And specifications is just a fancy name of a document that contains information for telling the programmer what to do. All right, so this is a step-by-step process. You can say step-by-step process outline. And then below that, we want to have the flowchart. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this, which is right here, and paste it here. So what I did just now was I just selected all, and I'm using a PC, so I did Control A, Control C, and I'm just copying it directly. Another way that you could do this is save it as an image and of course go in and insert the image into the Word document. So that's what I did here. Next thing we need to do is we have the user interface design. So we want to make sure that everything is in order. So this one's the first one, which is the welcome screen. This one's the second one, which is the list campaigns. So we have that here. And we have this one here. And then of course we have this one here. And there we go. So that's pretty much it as far as the images and all that goes. Now you still need to write down the deadline, and this is something that you're going to agree upon with the programmer. Expected deadline, what is covered for the price. So price, bug, price, because that's something that most people don't think about. They don't think about the bugs. And every program is going to have bugs. Even the best of best programmers, you're going to run into bugs. That's just something normal. I mean, if you think about, even Facebook has bugs all the time, and they're very obvious bugs. So even the biggest multi-million-dollar companies have bugs. So you just got to price it in there and figure out what the price is and negotiate. Is the bugs included in the price, or is it an hourly wage or whatever? I will say from experience that a lot of programmers will say, hey, I'll do it for like $500 just because they need the money at that moment. But then when time comes around, they realize, oops, I need more money. So you want to make sure that you negotiate everything up front first before you get started. So expected deadline, the price, but are the bugs included in the price, or is it hourly? What is it? So basically, what is covered? And you want to give all this information down here, and anything else that you can think of, any concerns, any questions, you need to talk to the programmer first. Don't go on Upwork or anything like that and just pick somebody. Make sure you do your due diligence, get on the phone, get on Skype, talk to them, make sure before you invest all that money, because software development is a good amount of money. And especially if you want a good plugin that is dynamic. So what I showed you down here though is, and I won't confuse you further, but Google, whenever you create scraping programs, if you decide to go with this, Google does not like to be scraped. So your programmer and you will need to figure out a way around that, which is normally by using proxies, and proxies cost money. The more users you have, the more proxies you will have, and that's something to think about. But obviously, that's why I'm saying don't worry about it right now. When you talk to your programmer, they're going to be able to help you with all that information. All right, so once you're done with that, turn it into a PDF file and you are good to go. Okay, so now that we are pretty much done, this is kind of a bonus, but in video number 9, I want to talk about finding programmers. I'm not talking specifically about going out and finding a programmer, but I'm talking about what kind of characteristics and traits that you should be looking for within a WordPress plugin programmer, because not all programmers are going to be the same. One programmer may be knowledgeable in one area, but unless they're really knowledgeable in WordPress plugin and they've created WordPress plugins before, then you're going to want somebody who is, their skill set is that, and not somebody who is really strong in a different area. You want somebody who essentially is specialized in this area. All right. Now, a good WordPress programmer is going to need to be well versed in PHP. PHP is basically a web application programming language. You don't really need to know all that, but it's just PHP. And then MySQL, which is the database that the WordPress runs on. And PHP and MySQL actually is a program language that runs many other frameworks besides WordPress. So just keep that in mind. So they also need to be well versed in the WordPress framework, meaning they have developed WordPress plugins before. Now, they should be able to do a little design, but don't worry if they're not super fantastic on the design level. You want somebody who is strong on the programming side, more importantly. Now, I want to warn you and I want to caution you. There are tons and tons of PHP and MySQL programmers out there. But unless they have produced at least minimum 3 WordPress plugins, do not go with them. Because like I said earlier, PHP and MySQL is a very common language to produce web applications. They should also be well versed in CSS3 and JavaScript. CSS is a design element which will allow them to create the user interface based on what you created earlier and make that happen and make it look nice. They should also be able to read someone else's code. What I found over the years when hiring people was that most programmers want to create a plugin from scratch. And while that is great and fine and dandy, you want somebody to have the ability to read somebody else's code. And what I mean by that is, let's say you give somebody a plugin. Let's say you find a WordPress plugin from another programmer. You buy the rights for that plugin and you want to make it better. If you find a programmer that wants to create it from scratch, that's not good. You want to find a programmer who can read somebody else's code to make it better. So there are many different approaches that you can take. You can either develop the plugin from scratch, and that's fine, or you can buy out a WordPress plugin that might not be doing as well and then make it better, but you want to find a good programmer. A good programmer is just that, somebody who can actually read somebody else's code. If not, then run, they are probably newbies. And that doesn't necessarily mean they are all newbies, but it's better to find somebody who can read somebody else's code. So whatever site you can use Upwork.com, you can use elance.com, which I believe now is actually Upwork.com. There are other sites out there. Whatever site that you decide to use to hire your programmer, do not hire anyone who doesn't have good feedback. So you obviously need to do your due diligence, look at their profile, make sure they have really good comments, make sure that they are actually developed plugins in the past. And most of that is pretty self-explanatory. Make sure you do your due diligence. Now, another thing that I recommend that you do is it's better to work with individuals and not agencies. Because when you have problems or bugs that arise, you want to have a dedicated programmer that you work one-on-one. A lot of times when you work with agencies, they will give you someone to develop your plugin, but then when you have problems, they'll give you somebody else, and it just creates a very major headache and hassle that you just don't need to deal with. So that's my recommendation to you. Hire individuals that you can work one-on-one, or individuals that you might be able to partner with and develop the plugin. So you might be the business side and the marketing side. You can partner with somebody to develop the WordPress plugin and give them a cut, like a 50-50% cut or whatever percentage that you decide to give. But at the end of the day, individuals are just easier to work with. And you want to think long-term as well. You will want to budget the initial costs and the long-term costs. Now, what do I mean by that? This is what usually happens. If a programmer bids, let's say $600 to develop your plugin, know that in reality that it actually costs 2 times. So normally it would cost $1,200 over time to fix bugs. Yes, it might be $600 for the initial, but there are going to be bugs and it's going to take time. Also, if they say like, oh, it's going to take 2 months, normally, yes, it might take 2 months for them, but there are bugs and they're going to have to work with you to make it work. So normally I double that or even triple that amount. Sometimes it takes 4 months. Sometimes it takes triple the amount, which is 6 months. So just keep that in mind as far as budgeting goes. Most of the time, if you even see somebody that says, oh, I can do this in a week, or I can do this in 2 weeks, unless their feedback says that, I would be very, very skeptical of that. I've seen some programmers and I've hired some programmers in the past that can do it in 2 weeks. But realistically, after fixing bugs and all that, it's usually 2 or 3 months later. Very, very rarely have I seen people do it overnight. Now, like I said, Upwork.com is a good site to go to and find programmers. And always ask to see previous WordPress plugins. Make sure that they have developed programs before and plugins before. And another little thing, another little tip is make sure that they all look the same or perform the same way. So what you're looking for are patterns. I've already taught you how to find patterns in consumer demand. But if you want to figure out if somebody's legit or not, look at their plugins, see if they have a style. Because everybody has a style. If you look at an artist, they all have a specific style. If you look the way you work, you have a specific style. And if they all perform within a specific style, meaning maybe they look very, very similar or they perform very similar, that's a good indication that they actually developed that program. Now, obviously, feedback is very important. That's a good indication as well if they actually know what they're doing. So at the end of the day, what I'm just saying is do your due diligence. And because the reality is that some people plagiarize, some people copy other people's plugins, and that's a great way to detect. In this day and age, I've seen so many people pretend to be programmers and copy other people's plugins just to get by, and then you realize later that you've paid this person and they've taken code from somebody else. So another thing you want to make sure to say is all of your code needs to be original. You cannot plagiarize or copy anybody else's code. All right. So with that said, congratulations again. You've reached the end of this video course. Make sure you go back, watch the videos, and make sure you actually implement everything that I've taught you to turn your idea, to design it, and now once you're done, you can give it to your programmer. Hello and congratulations on getting access to this video course. We're going to talk about how to hire a WordPress programmer to produce a great plugin. So this is video number 1, which is the introduction, and what I want to do now is give you a quick overview of what to expect in this video course. So video number 1 obviously is the introduction, video number 2 is skill sets, video number 3 is personality, number 4 is best freelancing sites that we use, video number 5 is researching, video number 6 is how much should you expect to pay, video number 7 is crafting the job post, and video number 8 is search parameters. Now this is based upon not theory but actual results. We've hired many programmers over the years, and you're getting the exact blueprint and the exact knowledge. So make sure that you follow step by step, because there's an actual process, and by skipping the process you're actually going to pay more, you're going to hire the wrong programmer and all of that. All right, so a decade's worth of knowledge put into this video course. So with that said, let's jump right in. All right, so I want to say, before we move on to video number 2, the goal is to attract the right person. So attracting the right person is key. Focusing on researching who they are and not how much they charge is what you really need to focus on. Most people are thinking about, okay, I want the cheapest programmer ever, and that's fine, but you got to realize that if you get the cheapest programmer, you might end up paying the guy and end up with a software that just doesn't work, or it works initially and it has problems later down the road. So you want to find the best programmer for the right price. So it's kind of a balance there. So what I see is the biggest problem that most people have is they attract the wrong person because they want to jump in without much thought or anything like that. And that's really the whole goal here is I'm going to give you a blueprint to finding the best program. But now that you have the video course, you're going to be doing it the right way. All right, so here's what you need. You need project specifications already in hand, meaning you have to have instructions about your whole plugin. You're going to need to mind map your software. You're going to need to have a wireframe of it, and you're going to need to have a wireframe, which contains user interface and all that information so that you can give that to the programmer. You can't just say, hey, I need this and that. I need you to clone this program or anything like that, because you really need specifics. You need a project specifications in hand. Now, I'm going to assume that you already have that right now, because my main focus in this video course is to focus on helping you hire that programmer. All right. So obviously you're going to need to have money. We're going to discuss budgeting later on, but you're going to need to have money. Now, I'm not talking about $100 or $200, and that might be good depending on what you need. But for the most part, you're going to need to have several $100s at least to get started, because the cheapest guy out there is not the best. I've hired many cheap programmers out there, lost a lot of money along the way, just thinking I can get a good price, or I can just pay this one-time fee and be done with it. But later down the road, regret it, especially when you have a product launch and all of your customers are paying for a product that is having problems, that have a lot of bugs and this and that. All right, so now that we have gone over the basics, let's jump right in and talk about skill sets, which are basically the requirements that a programmer should have, which is video number 2. So these are must-have skill sets for any programmer, specifically for a WordPress programmer. They're going to need to know PHP and MySQL. PHP is the web application program. MySQL is just a database type program, because with WordPress, you're going to need the web application to communicate with the database. They're also going to need a specialization in WordPress framework. They must have created plugins before that are either in the WordPress.org directory or can be installed on the dashboard. Now, the reason why I say that is because you got to be aware that some people can program PHP but are not really good at the WordPress framework, meaning they do not specialize in the WordPress framework. There are thousands, thousands and thousands of PHP programmers out there, but you need to have somebody who specializes in WordPress. All right. Now, the reason why I say that the plugin must be able to be installed on the dashboard itself is because what I found over the years is I've hired several programmers that are really good at PHP, but one good indication is a lot of times when it comes to WordPress, they'll hack their way around the framework and they can create a plugin, but it can't be installed in the dashboard itself. And by that, it tells me that they are not specialized in the WordPress framework. So that in itself is a good test or indication whether or not they know what they're doing. So I just wanted to mention that there. It's a little technical, but that's a good little test that you can use later on if they have plugins in the past that they've created, and you can simply install it within the dashboard itself. That's a good indication that they at least know a little bit about the WordPress framework. But that said, I want to make sure that they actually know what they're doing. So in my opinion, I try to choose people who actually have created plugins before. So try to find somebody who has at least 3 WordPress plugins on their belt. Plus, in addition to that, I want them to know CSS, which is basically cascade styling sheets. And that just tells me that they're going to be able to not only program, but they're going to be able to kind of at least design the user interface in such a way. And then of course, I hope that they can do JavaScript as well. So that's the main skill sets that I'm looking for. Besides that, what we're going to talk about in video number 3 is personality. And this is something that I guarantee you that the majority of people do not think about. And this is something that we started doing, especially in our headhunting process. And finding the type of person based on their personality is key. Finding that okay, they are definitely passionate about that particular freelancing position is very, very important. And we'll talk more about that in video number 3. Welcome to video number 3, and we're going to talk about personality. Now, this is kind of a funny topic to me because I really like talking about personality. I like to figure out people's personality, and it really baffles me because a lot of people either don't realize there are many different personalities in the world. They think that everybody thinks like them, or if there is personalities, when it comes to hiring, most people don't really think about, okay, is this person right for the job? Because will their personality actually fit in this job? Now, yes, their skill set might be great, but at the end of the day, I want to know if somebody is going to be passionate about the job or not. If they are passionate about the job, they're more likely to go out and figure it out. And over the years, we've hired many people, not just programmers. We've done headhunting for other companies as well, and realized that personality is a key factor. If you get the wrong personality working with you, you might be saying one thing and they might be thinking something totally different, and they might go off and do something different, come back thinking that's what you said, and communication problems there as well, as you can see. But personality tells you a lot. So why personality? Well, this is often overlooked and the reason for most failed projects. Skill set is great, but personality comes along with the person. So you got to look at 2 of these items. They combine make the best programmer. And with that said, I highly recommend that you look into the Myers-Briggs personality test and look for the best programmer personality via Myers-Briggs. Now, that's not to say that if a programmer comes along and they have, a personality that might not fit the Myers-Briggs, but they have the history, they have the backing, then they can show that they have that skill set, then you got to kind of have to make a decision based on that. You have to compare the personality, you have to take in the skill sets, and you really have to think through before you go ahead and hire somebody. But what I've found over the years is that if you hire the right person who has the passion and the love for programming, specifically WordPress programming, you have found the right person. Because even though their personality might not say so, they are going up and beyond to really learn how to fix those issues. Now, I'm going to show you in just a minute more on that and how to go about doing that and how this works, because I know to you, some of you, this might be a foreign concept, and that's fine, but you really need to think about personality. So what I normally do is, as I'm looking for people who have applied to my job post, I will ask them to take a personality test. And this is kind of a fun way of getting to know them better. So you know how they communicate, you know how to communicate with them, and all of that. Because if you can communicate with somebody more effectively, not only are you going to be able to get the job done faster, they're going to be able to communicate, understand what you need, and they're going to be able to get the job done at a lower price. So this actually can help you when it comes to budgeting. All right. Focus on passion over skill set. And while skill set is definitely a must, years of experience does not matter, in my opinion. I've hired programmers who have years of experience and with no passion whatsoever, and the plugin just did not come out the best it could be. So if they love programming so much they can't stop talking about it, and this is a great way to interview them. Ask them what they like about WordPress plugin programming and all that. If they love it, they can't stop talking about it. They just, they love learning WordPress. They love learning different languages. And if that's the type of person that you see, that's a good sign. Now, keep in mind, personality-wise, there are extroverts and there are introverts. Extroverts will talk your head off all day long. Introverts, they're saying the same thing, but it's inside of their mind. So if you can get it out of them, then and they start talking about it, that's a good sign as well. So personality. Sometimes what I found in addition to that is the ones with the entrepreneurial spirits are great. The ones who are thinking, okay, I can take this to a next level. I could, take this program, add these features to it, would make it really cool. That kind of entrepreneurial spirit, or not just entrepreneurial spirit, but initiative, or somebody who wants to make things better. That's a good sign for a WordPress programmer. Now, I will say, you gotta get people to sign an NDA, meaning a non-disclosure agreement that says, I promise that I am not going to steal your idea, or I promise that all the code that I developed for you, it's yours. It's not mine. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. Because the reality is, besides personality, you got to protect yourself. All right. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that before I move on. So let me show you how it works. Let me show you a little bit about the Myers-Briggs and how to find and use personality to find the best programmer. All right. Okay, so what I want you to do is head on over to google.com and type in the keyword Myers-Briggs. You're going to see a lot of different sites out there, and you kind of want to go towards a personality test. Now, 16personalities.com is a good site to go to, and you can actually go here. And what I like to do, like I said earlier, is every time somebody applies to the job, I ask them to take the personality test. That way I have a better idea of how they think. And sometimes I'll just send this to them. It's kind of a fun thing and gets them thinking, okay, this is a fun person to work with. Psychologically, you want to think about them and you. All right. So in their shoes, that's what they're thinking. In your shoes, you're thinking, I just want to figure out who they are, a little bit about them, their strengths and their weaknesses. Now, this is not 100% accurate. It's pretty accurate, but within one personality, there can be many different personalities depending on how they are brought up, and specifically culture and all of that, habits, all that. But at the end of the day, you're going to have an idea about how they think. Are they going to work well with you? So you might want to take this yourself. All right. So I'm going to move my screen down a little bit so you can see the URL as I go through. But I'm not going to take the test right now, but I like this site. And in fact, I like it a lot because not only can you take the test, you can actually purchase premium profiles. Yes, the profiles I believe cost about $129 or more than that, but it is worth it at the end of the day, especially when it comes down to hiring. So if you're not using this method when it comes to hiring anybody in general, customer support, all that, then you're actually losing out. Because what I found is, for example, one company that I hired, customer support for, we hired about 6 different people. And over time, we finally found, 2 people that were really, really good. And when I began to utilize the personality method that I'm showing you now, that's when we started to see success. So this is something that actually works. All right, so let's jump right in. Let's click on personality types, and most of your programmers, you're gonna find they tend to be like T's, like thinkers. Now, doesn't always mean that. I know some, ENFJs that are really good programmers as well. They're free-spirited type people, but really what it comes down to is you're trying to figure out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and can you work within those strengths and weaknesses. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. So you got explorers, you got entrepreneurs, you got entertainers, you got, this and that. So what I like to do, just to keep it simple, is go to Google and type in Myers-Briggs programmer. We'll just do computer programmer. And we want to get an idea of the personality that would probably fit this the best. So what personality types are best for computer programming? And what we see here is probably the INTJ from what I see here. But I'm not saying that if somebody is not an INTJ, they're not good. That's not what I'm saying. All right. But I'm trying to give you kind of a starting point. So as you can see here, INTJ programmers. So the I stands for introvert. So that type of person, they're not going to talk about programming to you all day in all the time, but it's going to be in their mind. They're going to show it. Actions speak louder than words. The N means they're intuitive. T means that they're thinker, so they're going to make decisions based upon the program itself. If it's an F, that means they're going to make decisions based on the person using the software, meaning they're going to make it more user-friendly. So if we look down here and we try to figure out why this personality might be good, this actually will give us a better idea and give you a better idea, especially if you haven't hired programmers before or you've hired programmers that haven't succeeded before. Just reading this paragraph gives you an idea of what you want to look for. So even if it's not the same personality type, this gives you a direction. And that's the reason why I wanted to show this to you, is because this is giving you a direction of where to head for, what type of person to look for. So for example, critical thinking. You want a programmer that can think critically, that can look at the code, read the code, understand the code, and make it happen. That at the end of the day is very, very important. All right. So going here, Personality Cafe, it says what personality types are good for programmer. It says I am a INTJ, so that's what we saw earlier. My INFJ family member is a Master C programmer. All right, so IJ, it seems to be a pattern, I and J. Now, scroll down further, you can kind of get an idea of what other people, the best programmers I've seen is an ISTJ. So jot that down, INTJ, so we can jot that down right now. So INTJ, ISTJ, and earlier we saw something else. Let's see, INTP. Now, what do you see as a pattern here? What are the letters that you see? I and T, right? So in this case, I think the pattern is something T something. And basically a thinker. So thinkers, like I said, they base their decision on the data itself. So you want somebody who's critical thinking. If it's something like a XSFX, which means a feeler, that's fine too, but they might have problems with critical thinking. So I wanted to scroll through here to show you the patterns. And you're looking for patterns here. All right. So let's take a look at the INTJ. And they're probably under the analysts. So INTJ, INTP, ENTJ, ENTP. Now, I will say right off the bat, ENTJs, they're more of the commander. So debater. So if you want somebody, you want to hire somebody who debates with you all the time or commands you all the time, you might think twice. So these here though, INTJs and INTPs, they're more likely not really going to debate with you. They're going to just look at the data, look at what you need, and they're going to go and program it. All right. So this gives you an idea of who you're dealing with. So if somebody took the personality test and they're an ENFJ, then it says charismatic, inspiring leaders, able to mesmerize their listeners. So they're really good at, motivation and all that. I actually have a friend who is an ENFJ, but he's really motivational, and he actually took the Linux exam and passed it with flying colors, but then he moved on to the next thing a month later and he decided to do something else. So that's a good indication of who you're dealing with, right? So you might have a programmer that's really excited who might get the job done halfway and then decide, I'm not really interested anymore, all right? So this is why you really need to look deep into personality types. It's a good way to indicate and a good way to predict what will happen in the future, all right? So you kind of have to do your due diligence, but let's say, for example, if you hired this type of person here and they are a programmer, if their skill set matches and all that, you got to realize you're dealing with an entrepreneur. So they might take your idea and go off and make it better. So you got to make sure you protect yourself as well. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed that. And don't focus too much on this. Just think, okay, INTJ, INTP is a good match. And based on the other ones, look at their strengths and weaknesses. So if you click on here, for example, you'll get an idea of who they are, and you go straight to the strengths and weaknesses, get an idea of what their strengths are, and see if it matches with you, and then look at their weaknesses. For example, arrogant, judgmental, over analytical, and all that. Can you deal with this person? Are you willing to deal with this person? Kind of thing. Is this person going to work well in your team? All right. So that's what you need to look for, an overall picture, and that's going to help you in the long run. Okay, so welcome back to video number 4. We're going to talk about best freelancer sites. Now, this is going to be a fairly short video because I'm just going to talk about what has worked for us and some guidelines that you can use when you're looking for other freelancer sites. And feel free to test other sites. This is just something that works for us. We have used Upwork.com, and also known as Odesk.com and Elance.com. We've used this site for the last decade, and it's been great. It's been wonderful. And yes, we found people on there that didn't work, but we found a lot of people that have worked. So the reason why I like Upwork is specific reasons, and I'll jump right in and talk about that. I like them because they have escrow, and what that means is that you can put your money kind of into a holding place so that the person that is working for you can see that you have paid, and it's kind of a mediator, and they can see for their sake and for their safety that you have paid and you have put your money there, and then when the work is done and you've checked everything, you can release the money to them. I like that because it's a win-win situation for both the programmer and for you, or the freelancer and for you. And you want that. You want to make sure that it is a win-win situation for the programmer and the freelancer and for you. You never want to find a site that is only good for you and not the programmer and the freelancer. Or you never want to find a site that is only good for the freelancer and not for you. All right. So that's kind of a good indication of a good site, freelancer site out there. Never ever pay a programmer before they have completed the work. I've made this mistake, even paying half up front, and even people that I know really well, I've paid up front and it never really works out. And the reason being, if you really think about it, is because anytime somebody pays you up front, then you're less likely to work hard for that money, right? So this has never ever worked. I've hired programmers that I knew for decades and paid them up front, and then it never worked because they already have the money in hand. Why do they have to work for it? All right. And during your sake, it's not a win-win situation in that case. So make sure that you never pay a programmer before they have completed the work. It just saves you time. It makes everything work out. Always use sites that offer escrow. Like I said, having that mediation so that it's a win-win situation for you and the programmer. Now, some sites don't. And while you might find a great programmer, you run the risk of losing money. And that's why I said I knew a guy, for example, I knew several people for half a decade. And these guys programmed for me and I gave them money up front. And a lot of times they were not willing to work for the money. And that's just general human psychology in general, is just that if somebody pays you up front, you're less inclined to work hard, right? Always use sites that allow programmers to be transparent. And what I mean by that is that you want to be able to communicate with them, you want to private message them, and allows them to be themselves, to show their resume, to show their feedback and all of that. It's got to be a win-win situation for both sides. Always use sites that allow for mediation in case of fraud or being ripped off. Meaning, in the case, let's say a programmer develops your program, you've paid them and they stole your idea. They've only done kind of a half job, and you want to have that mediation that you can go to just in case. I've gone to sites where there are zero mediation. Great people there who are applying for jobs, but no mediation, no escrow, and just being ripped off all the time. So always use sites that protect both the programmer and yourself. All right. So for example, if you decide to hire somebody on Craigslist, for example, you might find a good person there, but there's no mediation, no escrow. There's none of that. So you run the risk. Yes, you might find somebody who's good, but at the end of the day, you run the risk of having like 80-90% being ripped off. And I mean, if you think about most people who buy stuff on Craigslist, who are selling it or buying it, a lot of people get ripped off. You hear stories of people trying to buy cars and getting killed, So this is kind of a Wild West. Do you want to be in the Wild West, fighting for the best programmer, or do you want to be in more of a actual company who's, you're able to find people and, go from there? So think of it that way, and I think it'll just make more sense. All right, so let's move on to video number 4 and talk about research, which is basically what we need to do is we need to research programmers that we're looking for to get a better idea of how we can later on create the best job post so we can attract the right person. Welcome back. This is video number 5, and we are going to do some research in terms of finding the best WordPress programmers. And what I want you to do while we're doing this and while you're doing this is jot down common patterns of what the best programmers look like. If you notice certain things between, let's say, 10 different programmers, you know that certain people have certain feedback, certain plugins, certain things that just stand out as repetitive patterns, write those down. So that's basically what you're going to be doing, and you're going to take that information and create your job post so that you attract the right person. So these things can be like traits, personality traits, strengths, weaknesses, even basically things that repeat itself, whether it is positive or negative, whatever, just a pattern. Just jot that down. All right, so we can look at 30-hour plus people, so people that charge $30 per hour or more, $30, $50, $70, or even $100 an hour. And the reason why you want to look at these job posts and how these people are attracted to them and what got them to say yes is because you want to mimic that. All right, it's not necessarily that you're going to hire somebody that even charges $20 an hour. You're trying to just get an idea of what your job post will look like. All right. So jot down what the job post was. You can even copy the URL, paste it in your notepad so that you can refer back to it later. Copy it, so look at the future and jot down notes. So let me go ahead and show you how this works. Okay, so when it comes to Upwork, what you need to do is you do need to have an account. So go ahead and register account for free. Now, what I like to do first is up at the top, whenever you see the search bar here, you have two choices. You can either find freelancers or find jobs. Right now, we are not looking for freelancers. We're looking for other job posts. So we're going to click jobs, and you're kind of looking at from the freelancer's point of view or the programmer's point of view. Basically, what job posts are attracting them, which ones are not, and get an idea about that. So let's type in WordPress plugin and see what we get. So we can see about 2,000 jobs. We can click filters, and let's see here. We can kind of filter the jobs and get an idea. Any job type's fine. These are types of jobs that are attracting a certain number of proposals. So any number of proposals, or let's say we'll just do any, and we'll do $100 to $500, or pick a budget that you feel would kind of be around that mark. If you don't know, that's fine. And we'll just check these two to see, because sometimes our budget that is in our head is actually a lot lower. So in reality, it might take a lot of time to develop a plugin that costs $1,000 average, when in reality, we create a job post and we say something like, I want you to do it for $100, and nobody applies to your job posts. So this is the reason why we're doing this. All right, so I'm going to close filters, and we can see that it's about cut in half down to 1,600 jobs. And we can take a look and see how many proposals, meaning people are at least proposing 15 to 20. Let's see here. If we go to filter, we could filter and find the job posts that are getting 20 to 50 or 15 to 20. And let's see, people are willing to work more than 30 hours a week. The project length is at least, let's say, we'll do any project. Client history, let's find a post that is getting, 10 plus hires. And they got intermediates and experts. So now we've narrowed it down to about 118 jobs. So these jobs are jobs that are attracting programmers willing to work a long time, willing to get about $500 to $1,000 to $1,000 or more kind of thing. So let's take a look and see what these job posts look like. So what I normally do is I just open up whatever that looks similar or somewhat similar to what I'm looking for. So we can see some of these don't really relate to what we're looking for. So we're looking for something that relates to our plugins. So WordPress user management system, we'll open that. Website development, we're not looking for website developing, we're looking for plugins. Need WordPress plugin, so that one would work well. Plugin. So basically anything with the word plugin in it, WordPress plugin. So all of these are just WordPress sites, and that's not what we want. So let's see here, going down. All right, so it seems to me like these 6 up here are the ones right here. So I'm gonna scroll down here so you can see it better. But let's just take a look at this. So WordPress site development, I need to cancel out of that one. So we're kind of left with 3. Let's just take a look at these 3 and see what they say. So it says, I need a WordPress plugin, see video. So that's interesting. So if you click on the video, just watch it and see what they say and kind of get an idea of what they put in there. Now, like I said, I like to do videos just because with a video, I can put little tests, little tiny keywords in it, and I can put it like at the very end. And if somebody does not watch it, then they're not going to be, you know, the right person. So this is obviously very, very short description. I would put it probably a little longer, and I'll show you what I normally put later in the future videos. But we can see job success, 90%, about 20 to 50 people applied. They interviewed 11 people. They sent 29 invites. And if we scroll down, we can kind of get an idea of what they're doing. Similar jobs right here. So what I normally would do is I would go up here and go down here, and you can actually see who they hired. So this is a little sneaky little trick, but you can see the project and then who they hired, and you can go hire that person. So that's a little sneaky little trick that you can use. So jobs in progress. So even though they didn't close it, you can see who they hired. So basically they've done the dirty work for you. So you can copy that link and invite that particular person to your job later down the road. Now we can see that this is start date is June 29, 2017, which is actually today. So they're still looking for somebody. So basic WordPress plugin needed. We are looking for a basic mockup tool for WordPress. And this is the reason why you don't really want to post specifics. You want to post generalities, because people can come along and just steal your idea. So please note, communication must be 100%. English is a must. Yeah, that's good. You definitely want somebody who is either fluent or very, very bilingual in English, so they know exactly what you're saying. So that's another thing. You don't want to hire somebody who doesn't fully understand and just says, yes, 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 I know what you're saying. But in reality, they don't know what you're talking about. So the purpose of this, what we're doing here is we're just getting an idea of what job posts are out there and possibly even who is working for them. So for example, customize WooCommerce products for car rental site. The freelancer did this was this person here. So if you click on that person there, you're actually going to be able to see Kevin, his information. So you can say, hey, I noticed that you developed this plugin for this project that does this. I need you to develop a plugin that is similar, and this is how it works. So you know that that client was happy enough to leave that person a review. So this gives you an idea of who actually is good. So this should give you an idea of the job posts, but as far as looking for a person, you can go back up here, you can go find jobs and click on find freelancers. So choose freelancers now, and you type in WordPress plugin. Same thing. Now I'm going to talk about search parameters later down the road, but if you go here and you filter and just filter by 90% up, that means they have a 90% job success, and they charge at least something like, let's see here, they've earned about 10,000 or more. And we'll just filter these. There are other search parameters which I'll show you in video number 8, but for now we're just looking for people that charge at least $30. So Brandon, for example, he does WordPress web design, plugin, theme and plugin app specialist. Now web design, I'm not really looking for design, I'm looking for a developer. So Jabir, for example, would be good. WordPress expert. Everybody says they're a WordPress expert. I want a WordPress plugin developer. So someone who knows PHP very well, as you can see here. WordPress, Bootstrap, PHP, plugin. Okay, so there. So let's just take a look at these three guys. So Nirjar. So we got WordPress plugin developer. As you saw, PHP. jQuery is good. That's not really required, but it's good to have. APIs are good, especially if you want to integrate into something else. But they definitely need to know PHP and MySQL. Generally speaking, if they do know PHP, they have a good grasp with MySQL. Now, looking down here, you can see what other job posts, like other jobs he's working on. So what I like to do is just open it up to get an idea of what attracted him to those jobs. Because sometimes if the programmer sees a job that is similar to the jobs he's worked in the past that he's really liked, he's more inclined to actually apply to your jobs as well. So you can take a look at those. And what I like to do is I like to go through it, just get an idea of the job post itself. We're not really looking specifically for a person. We're looking for what attracted that programmer to that job post. We'll talk more about searching for programmers in video number 8. All right, so just focus on the job post itself. All right, what attracted them to this job post? So let's click on this one here. So it says job description. That's what we're looking for. I'm looking for an experienced WordPress plugin developer to help me create a new plugin which will ultimately be sold through the subscription-based model, blah, blah, blah. So this is good. They give generalities. They don't give specifics. And the specifics is if they sign the NDA and all that. Now, looking at this, you can see that they require CSS, HTML, JavaScript, MySQL, PHP, and WordPress, which is what we talked about in the skill set. JavaScript is good. jQuery is good as well. Not required necessarily, but it's good to have somebody who does that. But you can get an idea that this project cost about $500 to produce. So what this is allowing you to do is it allows you to get back to reality, to figure out what your potential WordPress plugin is going to cost, what job post to create, and how to track the best programmer. So I want you to go through and do the same thing I did just now and just jot down what are things that are repeating in the specific job post, what are things that you see, what is the realistic WordPress plugin cost. So you can go back up here and you can even type in, let's say go back over here and type in WordPress plugin, let's say SEO, like search engine optimization or something. So you go through and you can find and get an idea of different jobs. So we go back over here. So remember, we're searching for freelancers. So we can go back here to search for jobs and do WordPress plugin SEO and get an idea of what the costs are. So you want to go through and you want to find a search engine optimized WordPress plugin and see what people are paying and get an idea of what the budget is so that you can strategize on how much you're willing to pay. Now, I will say most WordPress plugins will cost about $300, $400, $500, $600. That's pretty much initial. And that's just talking about the initial phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3. That's not talking about anything else. But I want to show you this so that you have an idea of how you can create your job post. Okay, so let's answer the biggest question in video number 6, which is how much should you expect to pay? How much should you budget to make sure that you have enough money in the bank to pay for somebody who's going to develop your WordPress plugin? So by now you have seen the average hourly rates on Upwork. You kind of have an idea of what you might pay hourly, or even in some cases, one-time fees. But what about you? All right. So what I recommend is start low, but not too low. And you want to be realistic. Most one-time fees are very hard to find. I've hired so many people out there, programmers, WordPress programmers, and I've said, hey, if you take $500 and to develop this program with all the bugs included. And what I realized over the years is sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can get away with that, but you need a long-term strategy. What I should have done in that case is I should have said, if you complete phase 1, I'll give you $300 plus bugs included. Here's phase 2, here's phase 3. All right, so they have an idea of, okay, they can look at it and they can say, okay, this is gonna take me this amount of time. All right, so after phase 3, what happens? Can you hire them on a retainer for an hourly wage or a set fee or anything like that? You got to create contingent plans. You got to say, okay, phase 1, I'm going to charge this. Are you in agreement with that? They said yes. Okay. What about phase 2, phase 3? Okay, after that. So you can say stuff like, I'm going to pay $500 for you to deliver phase 1, including bugs. Then I'm willing to pay $10, $15 an hour for long term if needed, especially really good to have, and you need to have them during your product launch. Nothing is worse than your program dying and you're scrambling, you're trying to get the programmer. By that point, it's too late. So you need to make sure that you have them on retainer, especially if you have a product launch ahead of time, or you know that you're going to have a large amount of traffic and a large amount of people going to purchase the product. So that's something to think about. The worst case scenario is something big happens and you got to tell all your customers, here's a refund, or you're going to say, sorry, it's not going to work for 2 weeks because the programmer here is not going to be able to even look at it for another 2 weeks. One-time fees for everything does not work. It pisses off the programmer, and they're just going to leave you when you're going to need them, like a product launch, like I said. So make sure that you have them on retainer. You're willing to negotiate an hourly rate or even a one-time fee for a set amount of hours. Now, this is something that you might not be able to figure out until phase 2. This is something you might want to test them out and communicate with that and say, I don't know you, you don't know me. So why don't we work on phase 1? If you get phase 1 done, obviously you can work on phase 2. And by phase 2, I want to renegotiate with you. And if we like each other, then let's sit down and negotiate, what it's going to cost for a retainer fee and all of that. You can talk to them right now if you want to, but the thing is, you don't know if you know them or like them. They don't know if they like you. So if you're going to negotiate a set fee and you hate the person and you don't like working with them, that's going to be a problem. So that's something that you really need to think about. You need to negotiate it ahead of time to avoid complications in the future. Because like I said, you might pay them $500 and then $10 an hour, and then they get booked up. So you want to make sure you book them ahead of time as well. And if they're a really good programmer and you're just making a lot of money, you might want to try to hire them full time if you can, if all possible. You want to make sure that they sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure act as well. So basically them saying, I will not share this information. Or if they go out and they develop their own program based on that, you can go sue them and say, hey, you signed this NDA. This is a legal contract, right? And unfortunately, I have cases where decades ago, I didn't know about NDAs and I just agree with the person. And for example, I had a WordPress mailing list program developed and a plugin developed. And this one guy who, I forget his name, but anyways, this guy went off, developed his own program, this guy in South Africa, and he developed my idea, and now he's selling it. He's still selling it. I can't really do anything about it. It just costs a lot of legal fees to get somebody that far. But at the same time, I never got him to sign an NDA. So that's why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you things that I've made mistakes on to make sure that you save yourself. So also you want to have them sign, in addition to that, a contract saying they are programming everything from scratch and they release the original code to you. What I found over the years is some programmers will steal code from other companies. They'll just go online and they'll find a plugin or a program that might have the license in there to use the software, but not the way that you want it to do it. So they might take that code and just put it all together and all that. So you want to find a programmer that can code everything from scratch. There are programmers out there that will just curate. They'll take pieces of code and plop it together and make it work. You don't want that type of person in your company. All right, so I want to show you reality, what's happening out there. So make sure that they are clear of this, especially in some countries that don't see anything wrong with violating someone else's copyright. There are some countries, there are some cultures that feel like it's just sharing. There's nothing wrong with that. So you really have to look at not just the person, the skill set, the personality. You also have to look at their culture as well. Make sure that they clearly know that do not take any other code. I had one guy, for example, that I hired. He's developed a lot of softwares for me in the past, but I told him I want original code. Now, by that, he thought, okay, I'm just going to go and take somebody else's code and rewrite some parts of it, So that can actually bring you into legal waters later on, all right? Especially if another company find out that you stole their code. So you could lose a lot of money in court as well. So that's some things that you really need to think about that most people do not think about until it's too late. All right. So with that said, let's move on to video number 7 and talk about crafting the job post. So we're basically going to take all the information that we took from the research video and we're going to implement it in here. Okay, so welcome back. This is video number 7, and we're going to talk about crafting the job post so that you attract the right programmer. So by now, you should have seen enough data. You should have jotted down those patterns to create the good job post based on what you've seen. So here's what you need to do. In addition to what you jotted down, you might want to reverse that and say, I'm looking for somebody who, does this or do that. Some of those traits are just for you, for what you need to look for in a person. But in addition to that, you need to make sure that you list the following. So you need to list the following as in, hey, I'm looking for a WordPress plugin programmer that has a skill set, PHP, MySQL, CSS, and JavaScript that is specialized in the WordPress framework. Project description. Obviously, you can make a video if you want. In fact, I highly recommend that you make a video explaining what you need, or you can put in the job description, you can say, hey, I need a program that does this. And to protect that information, I would not put any information that is linking to your wireframe, to your project specifications, or anything like that. You can kind of give a general overview, but say you need to apply, and then I'll send you that information. All right, because you got to realize that job posts are public. Just like we saw earlier, everybody can see your job post. So if somebody wants to steal your idea, they can come along and look at your job description, your project description, and then list and say you're required to take a personality test, because I want to make sure that this is something that you're going to enjoy. You can say it in a positive way. You don't have to tell them specific reasons. You can ask them why they are interested in the job. You can say, I want to know why you're interested in this job. Some people might say, I need more money. That's great. But then some people might say something like, oh, I'm super excited. This is something that I wanted to do, blah, blah, blah. And those are the type of people that you want. Remember, think about passion over mundane skill set. If they're excited about it, that's a good sign. Make sure they know that they need to sign an NDA. So you might want to get them to sign the NDA before you even show them the wireframe, the mind map, the project specifications, and all of that. You also need to tell them up front that you will only pay when the work is done. No half paying, no third pay up front, none of that or anything else. You can say, you know, if you're new to this and you've never used Upwork before, you might want to start with some, you know, smaller projects, smaller freelance projects first, so that you can build up your reputation. But you can say, I will put the money in escrow, and when the work is done, like phase 1, I will give you the money. So you got to realize that some programmers out there, they've been screwed as well. It's not just about you being screwed. Programmers out there have been screwed before as well. So that's why I said you might want to split the phases up, so that if the WordPress plugin maybe takes about a month, you might want to say, well, if you complete phase 1, which is kind of the structure, and you can show it to me and it works, then I'll give you like a third of the money or something. And then only then, once it's actually completed, then I'm actually going to give you 100%, you know, kind of thing. So you got to realize it's got to be a win-win situation for the programmer and you. Now, when you get big and you've spent thousands of dollars on Upwork over time and they see that, then maybe you can, you know, say, make your own rules and all that. You can say 100%, I'm only going to pay when all of the phases are done. But that said, you got to make it motivating for the programmer, because you want them to do a good job and you want them ultimately to work for you long term. So it's got to be a win-win situation. And you also want to mention that all code must be original. Now, on top of that, here are some little tips and tests that I do. Normally, I record a video like this. I take a video via Camtasia and then I test detail. And here's what I mean. First off, if you do a video, then somebody has to watch through your whole video. And as you're recording your video, sometimes I'll say, oh, by the way, if you're watching this video somewhere in the middle, I'll say, make sure you put the keyword like green laptop or blue robot or something that is just out of the ordinary. And I'll say, put this keyword in your application so that I know that you actually watched this video. All right. So I know that sounds weird, but here's the thing. What I've realized over the years, depending on the job post, sometimes 70%, sometimes 90%, most people will skip that. Most people won't even read your job post. What you're trying to figure out is, did the person actually read my job post? Most people will say, hey, I can do it. And a lot of people will just take that and run with it. But then you find out that they never read your job post and they don't know what they're doing. So that's one step that I do. If it's all written and you don't want to do a video, that's fine. Put it somewhere that is kind of embedded inside a paragraph, so they have to really read through it. You could put it on the bottom, you could put it maybe 75% through, but put it in a paragraph so it's not very, very obvious. And say, if you put this keyword in your application, I will know to read it. Now, here's a really cool thing. When you begin to scan through hundreds of applications and they have put that keyword at the top, what I do is I scan through, let's say I get 30 applications. I'll scan through the top, and anybody who doesn't have that keyword, I delete. And I look at the ones that actually put the keyword in their application. So guess what? You could go from 100 or 300 different applications, and you might only get 30 people who actually put the keyword. So that's great. You move all that out. Then you look at those people, and you can do other little mini tests from that point on. Make little mini tests or out of the box questions in your videos or your actual job posts, and see who actually answers them. You basically want to rule out people who don't read your posts. All right. So that's what I would do in terms of creating your job post. Welcome to video number 8. This is search parameters. I'm going to talk about the search parameters you should use when finding people, being proactive, and looking for programmers and inviting them to your job post. So now that your job post is up, most likely people are applying to it, but not everyone is going to apply to it. So you need to find the people that might work well with you and get them and invite them to your job post to apply. So you need to figure out who to work with and who not to. So let me show you how this works. Okay, so real quick, up at the top here, click on this one here, click on freelancers and type in WordPress plugin. Now you could try WordPress plugin, you could try WordPress developer, whatever. As long as it has WordPress plugin or developer in it, you should be good to go. Now keep in mind that there are many different types of WordPress freelancers. There are ones that are really good at web design. There are ones that will say they're WordPress developers and they are really not. So you really, at the end of the day, have to do your due diligence. But anyways, if you type that in, you're going to see this. You want to click on filters right here. And let's begin to filter. Now, there are two types of search parameters. One for those of you who are on a budget, and two, those of you who want premium programmers. You're willing to pay whatever money it costs to get those programmers. So let's start first with those of you who are on a budget but want a good programmer. You don't want a cheap programmer. So for those of you, I would choose 1,000 earned at least, 90% or above, definitely. 10 below, that's fine if you're hiring from the Philippines or countries where $10 an hour is actually a high paying job. Just keep in mind though, if you hire an American or United Kingdom and it's $10 or below, you begin to question the quality there. All right, you gotta think, is this person willing, to work for you and survive and live, or are they starving and they're desperate, but they're not premium? So you kind of have to think about that, but you'll be able to see as you begin to search. But $10 below, if you're looking for Philippines, that's fine. $10 to $30 is fine as well. 100 hours build is a must. I definitely don't want to work with anybody who has 1+ hours build only. Now you got to think about it. If you do choose this and you have a lot of programmers have worked fixed term projects, meaning they haven't worked hourly, but they've worked on projects. Now, if you click that and you look through the applications and you see that somebody only has like 10 hours build, but then they have 20 fixed rate projects, then make sure you look at them. Just keep that in mind. But search parameters, I would do at least 100. In the category, doesn't really matter. You can choose software development if you want to. Now, English level is very, very important. You want to make sure that you find a programmer that can understand you the moment you tell them, like, oh, I want this feature, I want that feature, or when it comes to fixing the bugs, you need to communicate that. I've hired people that have had conversational English and it's just a mess. You have to talk back and forth and nothing ever gets done. So normally from now on, I normally try to choose fluent or native or bilingual. And then freelancer type, I usually do independent. I don't really want to work with agencies, because with an agency, you might work with somebody one day and you might work with somebody else a different day. So then you have to repeat yourself and nothing ever gets done. And with agencies, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll post somebody who has really good ratings, but in reality, you're not going to get that person. So I always do independent. I want to work with an individual one-on-one. It's just more intimate that way and easier to communicate. And last activity, I always do within 2 weeks. This basically tells me that I want a programmer that is active on Upwork who has worked on Upwork in the last 2 weeks. If you choose within 2 months, They could have spent time on Upwork 2 months ago. That means they're not active. All right. So these are the basic parameters that I would use for somebody that is on a budget. If you're not on a budget and you're just like, you know what, I want to spend as much money because I want to get the best programmer, period. All right. So if you're that type of person, you definitely want to keep all these same, except for the 100K earned. I would put that there. I would put 90%. I would put 30 to 60. To be honest, if a programmer charges 30 to 60, they're normally pretty good. You don't need to go beyond that. 30 plus even, or 25 plus, usually that's a really good programmer. So you could start from here, 25 plus, and go from there. 1,000 hours build, I would choose that. And you can even do within the last 6 months only. What you're doing is you're trying to make it so that you get the best of the best. All right, so native and bilingual, definitely. Independent, definitely. And within 2 weeks. So really what changed was the price, 10K, and this one right here. Everything else is pretty much the same. So now, if we close the filters, you can see that we have this amount of people. Now, we see that some are bidding about 1875 and all that. We can go back over here, filter, and choose someone who's 30 and above. We can see that there are 32 programmers here. And there we go. So now we have the best of the best. We know that they're 90% job success or above, which means they've completed other jobs successfully. You can see how much they earn. So these are the best of the best. And you can always go through and double check, like you can see here. Full stack developer, WordPress, expert in WordPress. So sometimes with Upwork, you don't get the exact, but let's click on this for example. And what I always do is I always look at their past history. If their past history shows that they have developed WordPress plugins, great, that's good. If no, I move on to the next person. And that's the search parameters that I use.